رمضان زمان البركات، رمضان زمان الحسنات، رمضان زمان البركات، رمضان زمان الحسنات، رمضان مجال الصلوات، رمضان مجال الصلوات، طوبى للنفس بتقواها، طوبى للنفس بتقواها.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر.
إنا أنزلناه في ليلة القدر.
وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر.
وما أدراك ما ليلة القدر.
ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر.
ليلة القدر خير من 1000 شهر.
تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر.
تنزل الملائكة والروح فيها بإذن ربهم من كل أمر.
سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر.
سلام هي حتى مطلع الفجر.
صدق الله العظيم.
صدق الله العظيم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to daralburhan's Tajweed lessons. In today's lesson, we will be covering arguably one of the most toughest letters to pronounce in the Arabic language, and that's the letter Lad. The letter Lad. And because it's such a tough letter to pronounce, I will be using a little prop that we use at the school with some of our students. It's a funny looking thing, but it's very helpful. And the letter Lad is pronounced from the sides of the tongue. So if I were to take the sides of the tongue and show them to you, the letter Lad is pronounced primarily through both sides of the tongue. This is where a lot of the pressure of the letter is built up, and the tip of the tongue is also touching some of the gums up here. So the pressure of the tongue comes from the sides of the tongue and the inside of the mouth over here and the inside of the mouth over here. And that's where the pressure arises from. And the front of the tongue and the tip of the tongue touch the edge of the gums over here at the very front. And so the way it's pronounced is la, lu, li, la, lu, li. There's a pressure that I'm creating between both sides of the tongue. Now it's your choice. If you find it a little bit difficult to pronounce it from both sides of the tongue, you can take one side or the other side. But the pressure arises from the sides of the tongue. Now, there are many issues that arise in people's pronunciation of this letter because of its nature because it's such a long articulation point. Actually, it's the longest articulation point of the Arabic letters. So it spreads all across the sides of the tongue, which makes it difficult to say. People confuse the pronunciation of the letter Dad with the letter Dha, with the letter Dal, with the letter Ta at times. And so I'm going to go through an example of each. For example, sometimes people, instead of saying Dhalla, they'll say Dhalla, Dhalla. They'll add a little bit of a Dha sound to a Dad, which is not supposed to be present in the articulation of this letter. Or they'll change it into a Dal. They'll go too light. Dad's a heavy letter. And what we don't want to do is make it into a light letter. We don't want to say yufiduna, yufiduna. We want to say yufidu, yufiduna. Right? And we also don't want to turn it into a Ta. We don't want to say yufiduna either. Right? So Dad has a very particular sound, la, lu, li, and we don't want to deviate from that. We don't want to turn it into a Dha or a Dal or a Ta. Now, another common issue is because of the heaviness of this letter, people tend to overcompensate, and they'll do things like use their lips to create an image or an illusion of heaviness, but it's actually not there. So people will say dwa, dwa. They'll round their lips and they'll add this sound to the dot in hopes that it's actually a heavy sound that comes out. The reality is the heaviness of the dot comes from your tongue. When your tongue goes up, when the back of your tongue goes up, the sound also becomes a little bit heavier. And so you want to say la. Notice I'm not doing anything with my lips. I'm saying la. I'm not saying dwa or dwa or anything like that. Another issue that arises is that sometimes people add a little bit of a ghunna, a little bit of a nasalization sound. So they'll say fadlu, fadlu, and we want to also avoid that. Dad does not have anything to do with the nasal cavity, like we mentioned with other letters in the past. Dad is just that. It doesn't have a nasalized sound, so you don't say fadlu, you say fadlu. And lastly, Dad, in pronouncing it, sometimes you'll notice in yourself when you might not be making the mistake of using your lips to make the sound heavy, but you might be doing something like adding a lot of air in your cheeks. Fadlu, da, da, bu, li. Adding this air is also not from the articulation of the Dad. So you don't need these, as my teacher says, balloons in your cheeks. You need to have the flow and the articulation of the letter doesn't have to do with a collection of air in your mouth. It's just la, lu, li. Until next time, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
اللهم لك صمت وعلى رزقك أفطرت. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء أن تغفر لي ذنوبي. ذهب الظمأ وابتلت العروق وثبت الأجر إن شاء الله.
رمضان زمان البركات، رمضان زمان الحسنات، رمضان زمان